Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on the 17th of October. As always, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-472-0391. That's your easy access to your latest National Weather Service forecast, no matter what part of Alaska you're calling from. As always, you can find our information on weather.gov/Alaska, your National Weather Service site for all of Alaska. One click will get you to your local forecast. And if you scroll down on the page just a little bit, you'll be able to find images from what you're watching tonight on the Alaska Weather Show, as well as YouTube links where you could subscribe to this show. If you can't make it into port in time to watch it on the TV, simply subscribe to it, and your phone will let you know when you're back in signal range that a new show has arrived. Usually that happens around 7:30 or 8 o'clock or so in the evening hours when we get that posted to YouTube via the Alaska Public Broadcast System, and we certainly appreciate our partners' efforts across all of Alaska, including the KUAC folks up there in Fairbanks, and certainly all the folks at 360 North, as well as those at KYUK. Now, if you ever have any questions about what you're watching on the show, you'd like to see something different, or you really like to know the name of the guy that does that fire safety video in the middle of the summer because he's got an amazing beard, let me know. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is an easy way to find me, and you can also find me at AFN. Tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be there at the NOAA booth. Make sure you stop by and say hi. Take a selfie there. Hold out the camera, and maybe we'll share that on the weather show next week when I come back in. So make sure you drop by our NOAA booth at AFN as we go through the rest of the week. Let's take a look at your weather now. Hazardous weather as we go through the next couple days includes wind across northern and eastern sections of the Gulf, including the northern Gulf Coast all the way down towards Sitka, mainly along the outer coast. We have a high wind watch posted that's going to start tomorrow night and go all the way through Friday, and we could see gusts upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour. Why is that bad? Well, it means it's going to be unusually windy for you, but what it really means is that if you've got loose stuff laying around, you haven't put stuff in the shed for winter just yet, maybe you still got the trash can sitting out, it would be a good idea to perhaps pull that in a little bit closer to the house, maybe tuck stuff up under the house or into the shed, and add a few rocks to the kids' pockets if they're waiting for the school bus, or hold on to the small dogs because it is going to get windy. And it looks like that's probably going to move in Thursday night into Friday again. Wind gusts upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour. This is one of those fall storms that we've been waiting on for about 4 weeks to show up. It has been a month of Sundays, it looks like, to get to this point. But it's also the same reason we haven't seen a whole lot of rain across central and southern parts of Southeast. It's just been unusually dry and unusually quiet across a large part of the eastern Gulf. We're going to talk about the drought monitor here in just a minute in Southeast, so stand by for that. As we look up north, the winter weather situation is improving. Winter storm warnings were in effect. Those will gradually be pulled back as we go through the rest of the evening hours. And for the Beaufort Seacoast all the way to the northern Arctic coast to Ukqiavik and the upper Noatak and Kobuk valleys, winter weather advisories will stick around until about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Because of that, we're still going to watch for some lighter amounts of snow and maybe just a little bit of freezing rain as we go through the rest of the evening and overnight period. It does look like there will be additional snowfall there, and because of that, travel up and down the Dalton Highway could still be tricky, so take your time, and sure would love to see some of the pictures there too. If you've got a little bit of snow in Ambler or perhaps around Prudhoe Bay or Arctic Village, just send them on our email and we'll take a look. Here's the drought monitor now. The drought monitor is a way to measure how dry things have been beyond the normal amount of precipitation for a period. So as we're going through the last year or so, we're noticing that we haven't had the normal amount of rainfall. And you can see 3 levels here of dryness listed. Yellow is abnormally dry. That means it's below average, and we're starting to see some impacts of drought. It's not severe, but it's certainly not normal. You go a little bit further south toward Petersburg, and you can see kind of a beigey orange here. That's severe drought. We're starting to see impacts on resources that are noticeable. They're not as, it's a little bit more than just unusually dry, but it's certainly not severe at this point, but we're moving that way. The darker orange is severe drought, and this from Petersburg southward toward Ketchikan, Klawock, Heidelberg. These are regions that we're seeing impacts to hydroelectric power, not enough drinking water. These are certainly noticeable impacts there, and that is all because we've had that really long period of dry and inactive weather for about a month and a half or so for a large part of Southeast. Sure, it's rained, but it hasn't rained enough, and it hasn't rained a lot. With this next storm coming in, the one that's going to bring the wind, it is also bringing rainfall, and it won't be a drought buster. It won't be the one storm that ends all of the drought conditions across Southeast, but it's going to help. So more storms like that will certainly start to ease drought conditions, but just keep in mind, it's not going to be the end-all and be-all of the drought conditions across the area. Now, as we head into the next 24 hours, we're going to watch the pattern develop here. Well, that's fun. Out across southwestern Alaska. This is going to move across the Gulf as we go through the next 24 hours and strengthen. And watch for that anomalous blob there. That's kind of pretty. You'll notice a lot of cloud cover moving across south central and southwest today. A lot of shower activity across southwest. And we're still watching the snow up across the North Slope and the Brooks Range. As we've seen today, areas of snow should continue across the Brooks Range and the northern Arctic coast. And a fairly healthy northerly flow working across the western coast and the Bering Sea as a result of this low across the north and western parts of the Gulf. This is a much prettier picture. Low pressure sitting across Bristol Bay at 987 millibars is a beast, and it's moving across south central and southwest today, pushing a front up toward southeastern Alaska. Behind this, a lot of cold air that's really being energized by the jet stream overhead. You'll see that in our aviation maps in just a few. Low pressure is also hovering across the middle Tanana Valley at 998 millibars. We have a healthy easterly flow across the North Slope and northerlies coming down the west coast and through the Aleutians, also pushing a lot of wind and rain through the area. As we go through tonight, don't be surprised if you run into the rumble of thunder or a flash of lightning, especially out to sea. But surrounding that area of low pressure, there's quite a bit of instability across the area, just enough to keep a thunderstorm in the realm of possibility. Showers for southeast, south central, and out across southwest. Snow and areas of fog and poor visibility. Low ceilings will continue north of the Brooks Range and out across the Chukchi Seacoast through Kotzebue Sound and out toward Nome, where a better chance you'll see a little bit of rain mixing in with snow there. A brief break as we move west. That's the ridge of high pressure, areas of fog out toward eastern Asia, and then a stronger, healthier southerly flow across the western chain. That's starting to turn into a little bit more of a beefier storm by Thursday. That's down to 982 millibars, but still way out west in the western Bering. The front moving through Kiska and Attu as we go through the afternoon. As we get a little bit closer to the mainland, low pressure lines up two waves moving through the northern Gulf. Each one of those has a reinforcing push of heavier rainfall. Right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be nearly as much rainfall for places like Seward as we saw just the last couple days. This time it looks like maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of rain rather than 3.5 to 5 inches of rain. So that's good news for now. It looks like we will not be seeing a repeat of the very concentrated and focused heavy rainfall for Seward. However, it is going to rain more, and conditions are already swollen out there. There's already areas of high runoff on areas in streams and creeks. So there could be additional flooding, or that flooding that's already there might get just a little bit worse temporarily. But we're not talking about another 5 inches of rain. So that's what you should take home. Across the outer coast of southeast, winds will start coming up later in the day as high pressure is anchored over British Columbia, 1,021 millibars there. And shower and thunderstorm activity will still be possible as we look at the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Now, as we get up toward the western coast, showers possible all the way up into the Seward Peninsula, where you might see some rain mixing with snow, and there's more snow as we head into Friday. Again, this is probably not going to be a huge accumulation type system, but we are looking at the possibility of snow developing across the middle and upper Yukon Valley, and probably a lot of wind. You'll see that in the aviation forecast as we go from Thursday. And then as we look at Friday tomorrow, watch for the area along the Yukon Valley as we're watching for probably some stronger winds and a 972 millibar low working through south central. Showers and thunderstorms across the central and eastern Gulf. High winds across southeast. Again, a high wind watch starts on Thursday and goes into Friday, and the front working its way into parts of western Canada and the interior. A quick check of temperatures for tomorrow. Mid to upper 40s for southeast, south central, upper 30s to low 40s all the way out toward Bristol Bay. Upper 30s for Amonuk and inland, 40 degrees around Bethel. 30 or so around the middle Tanana Valley. Up north, temperatures in the lower to mid-20s. Nome, you're looking at 30. Savunga, about 36. And high temperatures on Thursday. Back near 30 for the North Slope. Mid to upper 40s for southwest. Closer to 50 around Bristol Bay. South central and southeast, back in the 40s and 50s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather now. You'll see widespread IFR conditions across the North Slope through the Beaufort and central and eastern coasts there, all the way up to the northern Arctic coast, into Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, and into the Kuskokwim Delta and along the Copper River Valley, generally south of the Copper River itself, and really through most of southeast, with hit and miss IFR across the Alaska Peninsula and widespread MVFR across the Bering Sea. As we get into the afternoon, the next wave of low pressure will have enough instability that shower and thunderstorm activity may be a possibility south of Sand Point, Cold Bay, and Falls Pass, southwest of Kodiak Island. You'll notice improving conditions for ceiling and visibility around central and southern parts of southeast. Still holding on to IFR conditions close to Chilkoot and White Pass. Look for marginal conditions across most of south central, including the Kenai Peninsula and all over Prince William Sound. Through the Alaska Range, but just north of that, VFR should cut into the upper Kuskokwim Valley as well as the upper Tanana Valley, and IFR will linger around the Brooks Range and around the central and western sections of the Beaufort Seacoast. By Friday morning, IFR will be widespread again across the Brooks Range and northern coast into the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound region. Look for VFR conditions to be fairly widespread across the Tanana Valley and into the upper Kuskokwim, but then MVFR will be found up and down the west and southwestern coast. Look for shower and thunderstorm activity to spread into the Gulf with IFR across some of the higher terrain of the Chugach and south of the Copper River Valley, north of Chilkoot and White Pass, and then also across the outer coast of southeast. By the afternoon, low pressure is moving eastward again, and we'll have more instability focused across the eastern part of the Gulf, with IFR across the higher terrain south of the Copper River Valley, across some parts of the Alaska Range, and lingering across the north coast there from the northern Arctic coast all the way south till Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, and then hit and miss IFR across the interior, with most folks experiencing at least MVFR throughout the day on Friday, and certainly widespread across the Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and most of the Bering Sea. Here's your pass conditions in detail now. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR at very least throughout the afternoon. Look for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass to hold on to IFR in the morning with some improvements as the day goes on. Remember, low pressure is moving in from the south. Rainy Pass, expecting to see IFR conditions there with marginal conditions by the afternoon. Windy Pass also looking for similar changes with an IFR start for your Thursday. Isabel Pass also looking for instrument flight rule to start your day. Marginal conditions by the afternoon. Mentasta Pass looking for marginal conditions throughout the morning hours. Some improvement, though, possible by the afternoon to VFR. As we get through Thursday, marginal conditions there for Tanita Pass, and we expect to see Portage Pass getting to marginal. But probably an IFR start likely on the eastern side. Chilkoot and White Pass holding at IFR levels there as we go throughout the rest of your Thursday. Freezing levels show the 2,000-foot freezing line is dropping southward a little bit further toward Adak and just about to Atka for your Thursday morning. You'll notice some warmer weather across the central and eastern interior. Just south of that, levels really don't climb a whole lot more. 4,000 to 6,000 feet across parts of southeastern Alaska, with the surface freezing line cutting into the Alaska Range and the Copper River Valley there, also holding over the Seward Peninsula. So everything north of the Brooks Range, once again, could be looking at some lower altitude freezing potential for some icing, and at least some isolated moderate possible across the north coast. Now, south of the Brooks Range, those levels jump to about 4,000 to 6,000 feet in large across the west coast, the central and western parts of the Yukon Valley, and into southwestern Alaska, also across the western chain and the northern Gulf Coast. Southeast really not looking at a very large-scale icing threat as we go throughout your day tomorrow. Low pressure is still digging out a pretty decent trough across most of the Bering Sea and the North Pacific, with a decent south and westerly flow coming into southeastern Alaska. A ridge of high pressure across the spine of the Rockies all the way up into the northern Arctic coast, and you can see another trough over the upper Midwest for the lower 48 with high pressure anchored across the west coast. This is allowing that storm track to just zip disturbance after disturbance right into the Gulf of Alaska, and low pressure is set up shop right across the western Gulf with a decent southerly flow coming in across southeast. The ridge of high pressure seen here carving out that southerly flow across the interior, and then low pressure allowing that north to south flow across the west coast, especially over Bristol Bay. You can see a strong southeasterly flow across the Gulf, 30 to 50 knots for the eastern Gulf. Generally light winds across the interior, but the northerly flow coming down the west coast will keep things cool and unsettled, and continues to feed into that low pressure circulation, keeping it active and keeping things fairly wet across the north and eastern coast. Once again, a chance of thunderstorms just south of the Alaska Peninsula. We'll be watching for diminished turbulence across the region as we go through your Thursday, watching for some chop across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, across Point Hope to Point Lay to the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. At around the western end of Nikolsky, just west of Dutch Harbor in Unalaska, generally below 3,000 feet.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska. Back with your marine weather now, and a look at sea ice across the North Slope shows that we've got a little continued growth right along the coast. The high concentration ice above 80%, colored in white there. And the ice well offshore continues to grow and move westward there with easterly winds blowing along the coast. So we're going to continue to see this expanding westward. But again, as we were talking about yesterday, probably not a whole lot more at this point because the sea surface temperatures here are about 1 to 3 degrees above where they are normally this time of year. So again, fairly warm stuff, and we'll continue to see that ice building westward, but probably slowly at this point until the waters can cool down. You can check this out anytime you want, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Let's take a look at southeast now. As we were talking about earlier in the show, winds are going to come up a little bit more than what we're seeing today. And as we look at the inside passages, 10 to about 20 knots, southeasterlies with seas running around 3 to 4 feet. Across the northern Lynn Canal as we get into Thursday afternoon. Across the outer coast, 25 to 30 knots there with seas up to 9 to 10 feet. But as we get into Friday, big changes there. You can see a really sharp contrast coming in as we get into 35 to 40 knots, 21 to 23 foot seas there. On the inside, 30 to 35 knot winds with 7 to 8 foot seas, anywhere from 15 to 18 foot seas as you head south of Sitka. And then after we get into Friday night and Saturday, look for the winds to come up even more as we go through the day. A high wind watch on land as we get into Thursday night and Friday as a result of those changes. Thursday, easterlies sweeping across south central and over Prince William Sound, 25 knots there with 4 foot seas on the inside. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, and an east and southeasterly flow, 20 to 30 knots with a 5 to 7 foot sea over the Barrens on Thursday, and much stronger winds as we get into Friday. A strong southerly blow, anywhere from 25 to 28 foot seas coming in out of the south with easterlies up to 40 knots with 9 foot seas there. Gusts 50 to 60 knots possible in the marine areas there for Prince William Sound. Northerlies for Cook Inlet, 10 foot seas expected there. North and westerly winds coming across the Barrens, 45 knots with 9 to 21 foot seas, the highest outside in the western Gulf, of course. That's for Friday. For southwest on Thursday, look for a southeasterly flow inside of Bristol Bay, 15 knots and 3 foot seas. Northwesterlies crossing the Alaska Peninsula, 20 to 25, 8 to 11 foot seas expected there. Northeasterlies working their way through Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait, 20 to 30 knots with 5 to 9 foot seas. And our low pressure system sitting right about here gives us a southerly flow up to AKwx, out toward Chignik, 15 knots and 8 foot seas on Thursday. Now for Friday, a broad westerly flow is being pulled into low pressure that's moving into land. So we're on the south side of it here for the Alaska Peninsula, 25 to 30 knots with seas ranging from 6 to 8 feet in the Bering and 7 to 12 feet across the North Pacific, with 10 to 17 foot seas on either side of Kodiak Island, 35 knot winds blowing through Shelikof Strait for Friday. For the Aleutians, not too bad. 15 to 20 knots there, maybe 25 north of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. On the south side, 30 knots with 9 foot seas there, 14 foot seas for the Bering. As you move westward, you're back into that southerly flow, anywhere from 25 to 35 knots from Kiska to Attu, and looking at about 8 to 13 foot seas on Thursday. As we get into Friday, a little bit more of a westerly flow coming across the western chain, 20 to 25, 9 to 15 foot seas, and southerlies working across the central chain. Expect northwesterly winds over Unalaska and Nikolsky there, 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 7 foot seas. For the west coast, northerly winds should rule the roost. Look for 25 knots in just about all areas, 15 inside of Norton Sound with 3 foot seas. Otherwise, 8 to 10 foot seas in most areas, including around St. Paul and St. George. A little bit more of a northeasterly shift here out of Norton Sound towards St. Lawrence Island. About 4 to 5 foot seas expected there on Friday. And north and westerly winds coming down from St. Matthew to St. Paul and St. George with 6 to 8 foot seas on Friday. Easterly winds continue for the Beaufort, same reason that ice is pushing westward, and we're looking at about 4 to 6 foot seas there. Across the Chukchi, northeasterlies continue, 20 to 25, looking at 6 to 8 foot seas there for Thursday. For Friday, not a whole lot of change. Generally 10 to 15 knot winds across the Beaufort, and about 15 to 25 for the Chukchi coast as you go through the end of the week. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather is slowing down across the North Slope. Winter storm warnings will be allowed to expire this evening. Across the northern Gulf Coast, high wind watches are posted though for Thursday night and into Friday, with gusts upwards of 60 miles an hour possible. Look for stronger winds inside of Prince William Sound as well. Rain will move into southeast. That's great news for southern southeast and the drought conditions that we talked about. Look for periods of moderate to heavy rain for the Gulf and continued northerly winds down the west coast. Showers and thunderstorms may also find their way working through the northern and eastern Gulf going through Friday, and winds will come up across all of south central and the middle interior as we go through Friday afternoon. Thanks for watching. See you at AFN.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.